if I told you that every crisis, every recession, pandemic, and war is also a gold mine for the right people? While the world panics, a small group of corporations quietly get richer than ever before. This isn't a conspiracy, it's a playbook, and it's been running for decades. Crises are supposed to be unpredictable, devastating events. Natural disasters, wars, financial crashes, pandemics. There are moments when most people lose jobs, homes, and stability. But for some corporations, these moments aren't just survivable, they're profitable. That's because they aren't caught off guard. They've spent years building influence, hiring lobbyists, and securing government connections that guarantee they'll come out stronger on the other side. While the average person sees rising prices, layoffs, or shrinking savings, these companies see opportunity. They know how to position themselves before the storm hits, how to use crisis to push favorable policies, and how to quietly transfer public pain into private gain. Sometimes it's bailouts, sometimes it's mergers and acquisitions, and sometimes it's simply waiting for competitors to collapse so they can buy them out for pennies on the dollar. And here's the shocking part, it's not rare. From the 2008 financial crisis to the COVID-19 pandemic to wars that reshape entire industries, history shows us again and again that crises accelerate corporate power. Today, we're going to break down exactly how it works with real world examples, insider tactics, data driven insights, and a closer look behind the curtain of disaster capitalism. By the end, you'll see why crises aren't always accidents of history, sometimes they're opportunities by design. To understand how corporations thrive in chaos, we need to break down the playbook they use. This isn't guesswork, it's a pattern we see repeat again and again across different industries, different decades, and even different countries. Step 1, wait for the shock or help shape it. Crises often start with something uncontrollable, a housing bubble, a virus, a geopolitical conflict, but corporations don't always just wait for them. Sometimes they help inflate them. Example, leading up to the 2008 housing crash, banks like Goldman Sachs and Lehman Brothers actively fueled the bubble by selling risky mortgage backed securities to investors, while simultaneously betting against them. They weren't just innocent victims of a financial crisis, they were both the arsonists and the firefighters, lighting the match and then collecting payment to put it out. Step 2, panic creates opportunity. When panic spreads, ordinary people sell in fear. But corporations, armed with data, insider connections, and massive cash reserves, see fire sales everywhere. Example, in March 2020, when global stock markets crashed, retail investors pulled out billions. Meanwhile, private equity firms and asset managers like BlackRock quietly bought up discounted assets at record speed. Between March and June 2020, billionaire wealth in the U.S. increased by over $600 billion, while unemployment hit historic highs. To the average person, it was a nightmare. To the corporations with cash on hand, it was a once in a lifetime sale. Step 3, government bailouts and contracts. Crises allow corporations to reframe themselves as too important to fail. They step forward not as profiteers, but as essential players in stabilizing the economy, and governments often agree. Example, the CARES Act in 2020 injected 2.2 trillion into the economy, but a massive portion of that went to large corporations. Airlines, oil companies, and even defense contractors received billions, while small businesses struggled to even access relief funds. A Brookings Institution report found that 70% of the Paycheck Protection Program's funds went to larger firms, not small mom and pop shops. Step 4, massive industry consolidation. Crisis wipes out weaker competitors, leaving the biggest players to scoop up market share. Example, during the pandemic, Amazon's revenue soared by nearly 40% in a single year as local retailers shut their doors. Walmart, Target, and big box stores reported record profits while Main Street collapsed. It's not just survival, it's acceleration. Every competitor that closes its doors clears the field for giants to expand permanently. Step 5, rewrite the rules. After crisis, corporations don't just walk away with profits, They walk away with power. Lobbying surges during times of chaos as corporations pressure governments to make favorable long-term changes. Fact, in 2020 alone, corporate lobbying in the US rose nearly 9% in just 6 months, at the exact time when lawmakers were writing emergency relief policies. Example, many corporations successfully pushed for liability shields during the pandemic, protecting them from lawsuits even if workers got sick on the job. The new rules aren't temporary. Once passed, they reshape the economy for decades, and by the time the public catches on, it's already too late. So when you step back, you see the same cycle repeat: shock, panic, bailouts, consolidation, new rules. And with each round, corporate power grows stronger while ordinary people carry the cost. It's one thing to say corporations exploit crisis. It's another to hear it directly from economists, journalists, and even insiders who've seen the playbook unfold up close. Naomi Klein, author of The Shock Doctrine, coined the term disaster capitalism to describe how crises are used to push policies that benefit corporations while citizens are too distracted to resist. The exploitation of disaster is not an accident of capitalism, it's a strategy. Klein's work shows us that this isn't about corporations adapting to bad situations. It's about designing responses that ensure they always come out on top. During the 2008 crisis, insiders admitted banks packaged toxic assets they knew were dangerous, sold them to investors, then bet against them. Example, the SEC fined Goldman Sachs $550 million in 2010 for misleading investors, but compared to the billions they made, it was a slap on the wrist. Even when caught, the penalties are dwarfed by the profits. For Wall Street, it's just the cost of doing business. The Institute for Policy Studies reported in 2020 that U.S. billionaire wealth grew by over $1 trillion during the pandemic, while tens of millions of Americans filed for unemployment. Economists call this the K-shaped recovery. The wealthy soared upwards, while the majority fell behind. Same crisis, completely different outcomes.
I think it's important to understand that to keep the disasters coming, all you have to do is nothing, right? You don't actually need to plan it. This economic model is a disaster. It is a disaster, and it will keep the disasters coming at us without any conspiracies required. This market model that we have of casino capitalism, of deregulated markets, will continue to create bubbles like the subprime mortgage one, and then crises that can then be exploited to push through policies that you can't push through during normal times, like privatization of Social Security and charter schools and school vouchers. Each one of these crises presents an opportunity, but just by doing nothing, just by refusing to regulate the market, these boom and bust cycles.
Now that we've heard the experts, let's pull back the curtain even further and follow the actual money trail to see exactly how corporations pull this off. This is where the patterns come into focus. If you track the money, who gets it, where it goes, and how it grows, you'll see why crises are some of the most profitable times for corporations. After bailouts, corporations often don't use the funds to save jobs. Instead, they use them for share buybacks, artificially inflating stock prices, and executive bonuses. Example, U.S. airlines received over $50 billion in bailouts during the pandemic. Within months, they resumed stock buybacks once restrictions lifted. Taxpayers paid the bill, but shareholders and CEOs reaped the rewards. Government outsourced heavily during crisis. Defense contracts during wars, medical supply contracts during pandemics. Example, in 2020, companies like Pfizer and Moderna received billions in government funding for vaccine development, then went on to post record profits while keeping pricing power. Once the crisis fades, those companies don't return the profits. They leverage them into long-term dominance. With competitors weakened, corporations buy them out at bargain prices. Example, BlackRock and Vanguard used the pandemic downturn to increase their stakes across nearly every S&P 500 company. By 2021, BlackRock alone controlled nearly $9 trillion in assets, giving it unparalleled influence in global markets. This isn't just about money, it's about control. The bigger their portfolios get, the more they can shape entire industries. Corporations don't just profit from crisis, they invest in future crises. By funding think tanks, lobbying groups, and campaign donations, they ensure they'll always have a seat at the table when the next disaster hits. It's a self reinforcing cycle. Money buys influence, influence writes the rules, and the rules make more money. Every path you follow leads to the same destination, a transfer of wealth and power from the public to corporations. And the bigger the crisis, the bigger the transfer. Every crisis has winners and losers, and when corporations profit, someone else is footing the bill. That someone is almost always ordinary people. When corporations get bailouts, but small businesses collapse, entire communities are hollowed out. Example, after the 2008 crash, millions of Americans lost their homes to foreclosure. Meanwhile, private equity firms like Blackstone bought up those same homes in bulk, turning them into rental properties. Families were forced out and then found themselves paying rent to the very firms that took advantage of the crisis. Wealth concentration accelerates after crisis. Billionaires multiply their fortunes while wages stagnate. By 2021, the world's richest 1% controlled nearly half of the global wealth, a sharp increase from before the pandemic. Crises act like wealth accelerators. The poor fall further, the middle class gets squeezed, and the wealthy rocket ahead. With more money, corporations buy more influence. They shape laws, regulations, and even election outcomes. Example, during the pandemic, lobbying firms reported record profits as corporations poured money into shaping relief bills. This isn't just economics, it's democracy itself being rewritten, with corporations, not citizens, holding the pen. Crises don't just cause short term changes, they reshape industries permanently. Example, after COVID 19, remote work technology companies like Zoom, Microsoft, and Amazon Web Services didn't just profit temporarily, they cemented themselves as indispensable infrastructure. Once a corporation expands its reach into a crisis, it rarely shrinks back. The power shift becomes the new normal. So the consequences are clear. While corporations grow richer and more powerful, ordinary people bear the burden through the lost jobs, higher costs, and diminished political influence. Let's step back and connect the dots. Crises aren't just disasters, they're opportunities for corporations. They build systems to ensure they profit no matter the outcome. The playbook is consistent: shock, panic, bailouts, consolidation, rewrite the rules. Each crisis strengthens corporate dominance. The impact isn't temporary. Inequality deepens, communities are reshaped, and democracy itself tilts further toward corporate power. And here's the hard truth: the system isn't broken, it's working exactly as designed. Crises aren't accidents for corporations, they're stepping stones. The only question left is, will we let this cycle continue? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think the corporations should be restricted during crisis, or are they just playing the game better? If you found this breakdown eye-opening, hit that like button, subscribe to Follow the Money for more deep dives, and share this video with someone who needs to see how the system really works. Because once you understand how the money flows, you understand who really holds the power.